United States Supreme Court judge who has made a comment and is taking the flak for it, we are told. And he told a group of law students that if taxes become too high, then people should revolt. And I'm talking about none other than Scalia. Well, you know that there are a number of people who are expressing disgust and unhappiness about the 17.5% VAT on banking services. And you've also heard AFAC threatening that they will hit the street and mobilize, a demonstration against it because it will worsen the plight of the people. Is it a case of their misunderstanding of what really this particular VAT is? If that is what it is, this platform is seeking to give further education so that maybe, just perhaps, AFAC does not get to mobilize, these protests after all. So, on the bill, we are having one of the deputy ministers of finance to assist us to do this job. Was the process of implementation so poorly managed as is being suggested? This was a question to deal with. Now, you may have followed also in the international media that Ghana made the headlines last week, some part of this week, starting especially from Saturday. And what was it about? The headline was almost the same in most places. On the CNN and elsewhere, you would read headlines like, mystery US-flagged bombardier jets was chartered by Ghana's presidential office. Now, we got to know that's not the case. It belongs to the president's brother's, company, the mining company. And then we're told that it carried a high-ranking government delegation. We got to know that, no, that's not what it is. It rather carried a private business delegation. My question is, so what? If it was chartered by the president, so what? If it was not chartered by the president and it belongs to his brother, so what? What's the news in this? If it carried a high-ranking delegation of government or it did not and it was a private business, so what? What is the news about all of this? And what are the issues? Like a while ago, the Honorable former Attorney General was asking me. Well, we will also look at the question of the sada saga and JIDA. You know what is happening presently about JIDA. And the questions, boil down to whether or not we have come to find out that these are specialized vehicles to create the badly needed jobs, or they are meant for something else. IDEC has got some governance, multi-party governance project that is coming up very soon, and it is hoping that it might assist in ensuring that some of these agencies of states are working for the good of the people. We'll look at that as well. And very topical also is Paul Afoko, the new chairman of the NPP. Well, he prefers to label himself as the chairman and leader of the party. First time I'm hearing NPP chairman referring to himself chairman and leader. I know about the other parties doing that, but that sounds a bit new to me as far as the NPP is concerned. Is it a constitutional description of his job? Well, of his designation? We'll look at what his charge is. He's calling for unity, revival, he's calling for strategy, and he's got a roadmap that is to win victory for the NPP in the next elections. We'll look at how that roadmap will make success in the midst of all of the problems that are beginning to rear their ugly heads. Thank you very much, and I'd like to introduce to you my guest. But before I do so, let's go and watch this particular clip about sada.
This is the nursery of Richie Plantations Limited in Ketekrachi. The company is a service provider contracted by sada to oversee the implementation of the mango project in Northern Volta. The nursery here looks very impressive, with vibrant seedlings waiting to be transplanted. But the story appears different on the plantations where the seedlings have been planted. This is the sada mango plantation site at Kedonche in Ketekrachi. The 35-acre plantation has been cultivated by the community with supplies of input and support from sada, About 80% of the seedlings here have withered because SADA has failed to provide mechanized boreholes as promised. The community members are worried because their efforts seem to have been in vain. They say the main factor affecting the project is lack of water.
Pipelines na nya sprinkler machines bi wo so a ebe boy ama ye de agugu so saa kopem se ensuo ba beto ntina ne wo ho no fertilizer ne ade ne e wo bi na ensuo nto a wontimi enche fertilizer.
At Ehiamanchine, also in the Krachi West district, we found out that a borehole had been drilled on one of the plantations, but it was not mechanized. Here, some farmers who planted early have very high survival rates, but say if they don't get boreholes, not all the seedlings will survive the dry season. The situation on the mango plantations got worse as we traveled into the northern region.
I'm Ibrahim Idrisu from Salaga. We were thinking we can overcome this work very well so that our suffering will not be useless. Taking care of 20 acres as 5 or 6 of us, it's not a small. So we have to stop everything and started doing the work. Later on came to have it lost, because we didn't survive. Rain stopped, no water. When we have already transplanted in my farm over 1,000 mango seedlings, and they are all there dying.
He says the high hopes with which he took part in the mango project have been dashed by SADA.
Really, I was hopeful that we are going to be, excuse me to say this, we are going to be some people tomorrow, because if you have been given 20 acres of mango seedling, you can one day be, excuse me to say, you can be one day be a rich man, maybe, if the mangoes survive for you. And look at the situation where we are today. The mangoes are not surviving, so the suffering we suffered for about 6 months ago, it seems to be going useless.
In the Upper West region, Matthew Song Abu's Matco Plantation is the service provider for the SADA mango plantation. After we had toured some plantation sites under SADA, he told us he foresees about 90% of the seedlings on his plantations drying up before the end of the dry season because of SADA's inability to mechanize the boreholes.
It's really dry, and it gets drier every day, so it can only get worse by the day. So by the end of the time that the rain start coming, I don't think we could expect more than 10% survival.
So why were the boreholes drilled but not mechanized?
The reason why the mechanization hasn't started, for some of them, I can't explain. But it wasn't possible to have mechanized all farms. That one, it wasn't possible.
So if you couldn't mechanize it, then you shouldn't have planted, because you knew that if the rain stopped, there would not be any source of water.
At the time we were planting, we were convinced that they could be mechanized.
Gilbert Eddy considered the company contracted to mechanize the boreholes has defaulted. Despite the concerns raised by the affected farmers, Gilbert Eddy says the mango project is a success.
One, you have identified the farmer. One, you've identified the sites. Two, you have the borehole. Stamping has been done in that place. You have taught farmers how to plant. So these are successes.
What was the ultimate goal of that project?
No, but that's what I'm saying.
Was it to see the mangoes alive, or to the attempt doing it? You've gone
you
through
see,
all
let
the
me
processes.
give you an example. Let me give you an example. For instance, there are others who have gone through these difficulties, and we have learned from their mistakes and tried to improve on it. We're not the first to introduce mango planting.
When Joy News visited some private mango plantations, the story was different from those of SADA. This beautiful plantation you are seeing is the Matco Mango Plantation in Zang in the Kalio Nadoli district of the Upper West region. Matco is one of the service providers of SADA, and it was selected based on its expertise. Unfortunately, however, this is not what we see at SADA. So we ask what went wrong with the SADA projects. For Joy News, Manasseh Azure Awine reporting.
You're welcome back. And for those of you who have the benefit of television, you saw the pictures there. You saw the plantations that are supposed to grow mango, whatever it is. And unfortunately, they are dry, bare lands. That's the very sad story about the sada saga. Right, so we're starting right away with that. We'll be joined later and very shortly by Dr. Emmanuel Akwete of IDEC and Deputy Minister of Finance and Economic Planning. But right now in the studio, I have with me Abdul Malik Kwekubako Jr. He is the Editor-in-Chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper and a regular panelist. I also have the Honorable Ayikwe Otu, who is a private legal practitioner and a former Attorney General of the Republic of Ghana. Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome to the studio, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, I want us to try and get some things in perspective. You've been listening to that clip by Manasseh Azore-Awuni about what appears to have happened. And these are the hard facts. These are the evidence on the ground. I don't know, first of all, with you, when you watch a clip like this and you find that the president, desiring to create jobs for people. And of course, that's been a program that we know was started by the NPP and the NDC, is building upon. Desiring to create jobs for the people brought this about. Now, put these people in charge to ensure that the monies that have been voted for these projects yield results. And now we are learning that the monies have literally gone to waste. How do you feel when you hear and see things like this?
Well, thank you. We are aware that monies that are used for such projects are the people's monies. It belongs to everybody. And therefore, there is need for accountability. In which case, where such wasteful activities are found, people will rise up, people will ask questions. The press should be able to hold government accountable, and all others should do likewise. Because what's the point of giving money to people for a particular project, and the project does not see the light of day? You go to plant trees in the dry season, and the prospects for getting some irrigation is not seen through, so that at the end of the day the trees wither and the money goes to waste.
A whopping 32 million Ghana cedis.
Yes. When we are crying,
we have nothing to show for it.
When we are crying for other things.
Right.
So one begins to wonder, do we have supervision? Who is in charge of this project at all? Do we really have supervision? They claim that there is no proper legal basis for setting up their own thing, and that they're going to work on it to get it through. I am not aware of any law that has now been passed, giving legal backing to the whole idea of GIDA. I'm not too sure about that.
We'll deal with GIDA specific. Yes. This is sada. Let's finish with sada. We'll deal with GIDA. GIDA has its own problems.
Okay. So, well, my initial comments are that clearly when, state money is misapplied, questions ought to be asked. And if people must be called to order, why not? And if people must be made to, face the music for what they are doing, I think that we should all be in support of that.
I'll come back and you tell me, with the evidence that's available so far, you think it's okay to continue to make suggestions and not make categorical, emphatic statements about what the president or the country should do to correct this particular situation. I'm excited to have Kwaku Ricketts-Hagan join us as the Deputy Minister, Finance and Economic Planning. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Morning.
Second or third time we're having you in this year.
Sure.
Great. Right. We're supposed to have actually started the discussion on the VAT matter, but that's all right. We'll deal with it after this one. Now, right. Kwaku, I don't know what your preliminary comments will be, particularly with this afforestation project. Can't the managers of SADA also find an escape route an escape route in the fact that by the end of June 2013, that particular contract was expired and they had to seek for a renewal, and it wasn't renewed because of the problems we know that had come up with sada?
Well, interesting question, but we need clarity.
Right.
When you mentioned 32 million Ghana cedis,
right,
gone to waste, immediately it triggered some line of confusion in my mind that we might be dealing with two things here. The clip you played has absolutely nothing to do with the 32 million Ghana cedi matter contract. You are talking here of Mango project. The Mango project, as I sit here, I have no knowledge about. But even if you listen to Manasseh's report carefully, he spoke of a company. He didn't mention the name of the company.
Right.
So clearly, we are not talking here of the 32 million afforestation contract.
That's what
sada.
I am referring to.
No, but the clip. That's why I said let's seek clarity, so that we know which issues we are dealing with. I hope you understand what I'm saying.
I decided first to look at the issue of the afforestation.
Yeah, but the mango. But you brought in 32 million cedis. That's specific to a particular contract. And I think you understand what I'm saying.
That's right.
Yes, that contract was the one between sada and the ACI construction. That's specific. The Mango project obviously might be with another company. I have no documentation to that effect. But even based on the drift of the report and the clip you played, it is obvious that we are talking of two things. They may all fall under the general coverage of afforestation. Because I believe if you are planting mangoes and the things, they come within that context. So we need to get the lines very clear and then deal with it. So with the mango thing, I have hardly anything to say. If the evidence that was put there is comprehensive and reflective of the general situation in terms of the Mango project, then we can all admit that it has failed and it ought to be interrogated, and those responsible for that failure ought to be held responsible.
The Mango project specific in the Kratchi area, Kratchi West District, where you had one search that was going on at the Richie Plantations Limited, you had about 80% of the seedlings that they had planted withering or gone. And then, for example, if you came to Saga in the northern region also, they had a 20-acre mango project there. That's also because of the lack of water. And one of them says, no rainfall and no water. When we have already transplanted over 1,000 mango seedlings and they are there dying. We are told also about 90% of the seedlings that were used in one of the plantations in the Upper West region are also, dying.
We are still talking mangoes here. We are still talking mangoes.
Right.
That's where your focus is now.
You have moved specific to the mangoes.
Nothing, no knowledge about the mangoes.
Right.
I don't know. I haven't done any
the evidence was put on.
Yes, and I'm saying based on what you have put out there, then we can confidently say it's failed. And so you then interrogate why it failed and look for, identify those who were responsible for the failure.
Right.
And if there are any sanctions that must be applied based on due process, you proceed to deal with it.
Right.
If it's the mango we are talking about.
Right.
But you brought in the 32 million.
Which is for the afforestation.
Which is for the afforestation that had a specific line of contract with ACI construction.
That's correct.
I don't know if you want us to interrogate that as well.
Please do that.
As part of this.
Do that.
Yes.
We're doing it together.
Yes. Coverage, scope and coverage. I'm not sure. I haven't bothered to follow extensively the reports that Joy News has put out relative to the afforestation thing. But I don't think anything that had been put out there was fabricated. I don't think anything that was put there was manufactured. And I do not even see any malice or mischief in it. I think there was genuine work by a media house and a good journalist out in the field to do what the public interest demands of all of us. So what you see in terms of the video, in terms of the recording, the audio, they are not fabricated. So we have to accept them on their face value and insist that those things must trigger some further investigations.
Right.
But having said that, scope and coverage, I am not sure if you also know about the report or the investigations that the UDS was tasked to conduct. I don't know if you've seen a copy of that report. I have seen a copy, and it was done by the Faculty of Renewable Natural Resources of the University for Development Studies, Tamale. It's dated December 2013. And let's be frank, what I have here is titled Draft Final Report. I'm not allergic to using draft reports, as I indicated last week, except that I use it with a lot of caution. And you let everybody know that this is the context within which you are dealing with the matter. Now, based on their report, which, as I said, dated December 2013, the project evaluation team was made up of Professor S.K. Opon, team leader, Mr. W.J. Asante, team member, Mr. D. Tom Derry, team member, and Mr. B.N. Batuewi. I'm not too sure I pronounced it well. May I be forgiven for that. He's team member. And they conducted this thing based on a report that had been submitted by ACI Construction. And so the idea was, and let me read the executive summary, the introductory remarks. It says, planting trees is a novel idea, especially in vulnerable environments like the savanna woodlands that characterize the Sada catchment area. Sada envisions a forested and green north intended to achieve climate mitigation and economic prosperity. This, and this is the relevant part, this report validates or otherwise the activities provided in the ACI Construction Limited's report on the status of the Sada Afforestation Project, which would also be used as a basis for future monitoring and evaluation of the project. The main task, so and so. Now, what I find interesting is that the UDS team claim that a total of 145 plantations were surveyed in all the 4 afforestation zones, consisting 45 political districts in 5 regions. 8 trees species were planted in the various operational zones. They named the trees. They are much of a biological and other things. I'm not sure our listeners and viewers are interested in those things. Then they further make the point that the average percentage survival of all the planted species in the Sada plantations were very high, 85%, with the highest 88% recorded in the eastern zone and the least 76% in the southern zone. The western zone had the highest acreage of 204 hectares, while the central zone had a least of 140 hectares. Now, coverage and scope. This is also a credible institution, tasked to also do a survey. According to them, they did a survey.
Let me introduce Dr. Emmanuel Akwete, Executive Director of the IDEC. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
Good.
According to them, they did a total of 145 plantations in 4 afforestation zones, encompassing 45 political districts in 5 regions. That also ought to be verified.
Right.
No, I haven't finished. I haven't finished.
No, I was going to tell you an aspect of the verification process.
Yes.
Because Joy News' Manasi, who spent about quite a lot of time there, went to check one particular site, which is the Bawa Barracks in Tamale, and about 70% of the trees had died at the time that he had been to that place, that afforestation site. Not even a single tree that had been planted survived.
And as I said, nothing he put out there can be described as fabricated. We are talking of one site. I'm talking of 145 plantations that were surveyed by the Faculty of Renewable Resources, Natural Resources, point in time, December 2013 rather. I don't know the time Manasi went to the field. But the context, you yourself hinted it. If a contract expires, you give a contract to somebody July 2012. The contract expires June 2013. Post plantation, the sustainability is the whole thing. This whole project, this whole investment, sustainability is the key. And post-plantation is key, that the management of what you have planted, ensuring that what you have planted is sustained, so that the objective that you seek will be achieved. Now, post-June, question, who was managing the forest plantations? From my investigations, the contractor was still on the field for 3 months. By September, they had written April, May for renewal of contract, which was declined.
Right.
So post-June to September, when the contractor left, who was managing trees at all the plantations? There were 304 plantation sites. I'm sure you know that.
Right.
304 plantation sites. It was within the remit of sada as the initiating authority, the one that gave out the contract. If a contract has expired and you no longer are interested in renewing it, but trees have been planted, you ought to have the responsibility of ensuring the sustainability of the work that was done.
Right.
Because it's part of the brief that you gave to the contractor.
You're right. Okay. Now, just hold on briefly for me. And obviously, governance issues are very much in this matter. I'll bring Dr. Kwete on that one. But, Honorable Minister, when you hear and see the evidence as we have gone, Joy News has gone and put out, and you hear the managers of the project themselves complaining that this is what has happened. In the Upper East region, the coordinator of the ACI construction, company, that's Raymond Abonto, he said he took the Joy FM team around, and he said that the trees were withering because all the workers had been laid off. Does that suggest that when the issues came up about the rot in the Jida, we didn't plan how to properly take care of the situation? We simply went on to say, look, we are not renewing the contract, and that's the end of it. We didn't think about the fact that you had given a contract for the planting of trees, and the trees were being planted or had been planted and needed to be taken care of in the process?
Thank you very much. Following this sada, Jida stories and the continuation of it that we are having here today makes really the whole thing very, very sad. I mean, this is as I'm sure we'll all agree, a well-conceived idea. It is project that were supposed to, this project was supposed to create jobs for our people. Project was supposed to get our people, out of poverty. Project was supposed to improve the economic lives of our people. There are a lot of good pluses you can say about this project. Unfortunately, in the process of implementation, as we have done for many years, we always get it wrong. Obviously, there are a lot of things that really went wrong. I mean, I'm listening to the way the management and everything. You can clearly see that something, horribly went wrong. The important thing is that we have started basically, addressing the problem. And I don't want to say too much about what went wrong, but I hope that we learn some serious lessons from this. And going forward, if we put forward such a good project, we make sure that it doesn't suffer the same fate.
Well, as for what went wrong, it's out there for the jury. I'm sure you have access to that investigative report that was published, and we have discussed portions of it. You've also had the benefit of the President's advisory team and the advice that they gave, on which the President has taken some actions, the IOCO, some prosecutions that are going on now. And unfortunately, people largely are not excited because there are some people who took some actions who people feel ought to be facing the music now, but are not. Dr. Kwete, I am looking at for example, the question I put to him, a problem came up. An investigative committee was set up. It found out that these were the problems. They are management issues. You don't have the right caliber of people to manage the entity. Finances are in shambles. We are giving out contracts that are lopsided heavily, and the government is losing in the process, and the service providers are making, Shylock profits out of all of that. Now, we decide to put a stop to the project. And in the meantime, we are aware that this project is ongoing. Trees have been planted. They need to be watered. 32 million good Ghanaian cedis sunk into that project. And now we are bringing the evidence of how, like Kuku says, we should be cautious in making a general statement that all of them have withered. But so far, all the places that were visited by Manasseh Azariah, the trees are gone. And the managers say, we sought a renewal, we didn't get it, the government declined. I'll play you a video shortly. But let's hear what you have to say.
Thank you very much, and apologies for coming late. I couldn't access my documents, and therefore I didn't want to come. But when I heard Abdul Malik was here, I felt comfortable that I would depend on his details and so on. But generally speaking, I think where we should start from is to ask the question, how was the decision made? And because this is not the first time, we are hearing more cases. And so decision-making is the crucial thing. How was the decision made? And I think it's good to probe that. I don't know, we haven't talked a lot more about it. If we're looking at how decision is made, you have to take into account a whole lot of factors. And you wouldn't have made a decision also without assuring yourself that the mechanisms for implementation, for delivery, for achieving the results are aligned. And it even raises the fundamental question, what was going to be the role of the civil service? Right. Because the civil service, if you want to look at technical and administrative implementation of any decision or policy, you need the civil service. They are the professionals, well trained, they know the rules and regulations, they have their monitoring mechanisms and all that. And we have to ask the question. So when we say, why do we get it wrong, as the Honorable Deputy Minister said, I think the problem lies somewhere in how the decisions are being made. And I think the question we should ask ourselves is that what is interfering with decision making, especially when we have to deal with taxpayers' money, or the president wants to make decisions in the national interest, in the public interest? What interferes with that decision making? Is he able to rely on the institutions, the institutional mechanisms, the professionals? Does he have all the information? Is the decision sufficiently insulated, or is it anchored within the systems and processes that will ensure that it is done the right way in the national interest, and every penny or losses are cut and the results are achieved? It seems to me that there is a problem with decision making. And my suspicion is that either there is a certain tension between the bureaucracy and the politicians, the political parties. And in that case, what you find is that, certain compromises occur. And so when you hear the JIDA story, management, competency, finances, construction, and so on, then you ask yourself, wow, so how did it go through Parliament? Were these problems not anticipated? Were they not foreseen? An experienced bureaucrat could immediately tell you. Now, how was the recruitment made? Who made those decisions? Was it competitive? Was it open up? Or was it a way of giving jobs to the boys? Or
for most
whatever?
of them, as far as we know, the service providers just come, they give you a proposal of what they can do. You buy the proposal. They tell you that we need an X amount to do the project. Governments or sada or JIDA pays all the money to them. And then they wait for the party that is giving them the contract to supply the personnel.
It tells you the role that the institutions, the bureaucracy as a state institution is not being allowed to do its work. Simple. the politicians are interfering massively, from the making of the decision, from the appointments, even putting the project forward, and so on. And that, for me, is where the problem is. And so the president could, even when the president has given the directives, they still find a way of getting things done. So we should ask ourselves, no bureaucracy would, if it's not interfered with, could take that risk. Right. Because you'll be found out, you'll be dismissed, and so on. But there are other factors, and I think we should focus on how political decisions, okay, when made this way, produce this kind of result. Because those who would be the gatekeepers, because they are supervising, they are monitoring, and they are reporting, and so on, probably would not do it thoroughly because they feel, well, you know, this one, I may be putting my job at risk. But if we've shielded off the institution, the public services, and they are doing the profession because a decision has been made and it ought to be left to them, and the political things have been cut out, you will not get these results. At least they will minimize them. You will see the problem at a very early stage, and you may engage to stop it, not when it's gone so wild, out of control.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Ekotu, you vote money for the project. We are told they are planting at a time that may not be convenient, that may not be the best. You have alluded to that. And then, for example, talking about the mango and the other projects also, we're told that entities were engaged who were supposed to ensure that they mechanized boreholes, you know, so that those could be used to, as it were, water mango trees. These did not happen. Question is, what is going on and what should happen and what has happened to these people?
Well, for a sound bite, I would say bad management. Bad management through and through. That is all that we are saying. I mean, if you plant trees during rainy season, you can rely on the elements that maybe the rains will come and then you may be lucky that the trees themselves will grow. But if you decide to plant the trees during the dry season and you really foresaw the problem, that is why you started talking about mechanized boreholes and the rest. And then you couldn't see through to it that you got the mechanized boreholes so you could get water to water the trees. Clearly, it is a case of very bad management. And somebody must be held responsible because, as I keep on saying, it is the people's money that is going waste. And we cannot continue like that. You know, sometimes our friends on the other side are quick to say that people want to make politics, you know, out of the situation.
And if you don't mind, let me just give you a quote from the former CEO of SADA, Gilbert Seduidi. He says that, quote, "The reason why the mechanization hasn't started for some of them, I can't explain. But it wasn't possible to have mechanized all farms. At the time we're planting, we were convinced that they could be mechanized." He considered that the company that was contracted to do this job failed to mechanize the boreholes. The company had defaulted.
That is a breach of contract then. I mean, if you award contract to a company to ensure that they go into mechanize boreholes and they fail to do that, that's a breach of contract. And if indeed they have been paid, then why don't you ask them to refund the money and so that you can go back? You see, this project is a very huge program. And I'm surprised at the lackadaisical approach that has been, you know, adopted. You're trying to you know, look at the northern parts where the weather is that hot. We have just come back from the north. Everybody was in a hat or something to ensure that at least we kept our temperatures within limits, you know. So if you go and you want to do afforestation in those areas, why? It's a good idea that maybe the trees, you know, will lead to a cooler climate. And yet you adopt this kind of, you know, like a lackadaisical approach. You give money to people, you don't even care what they do. You sign contract with people, there's no supervision, nobody cares, you know. Clearly, I mean, this is a huge failure on the part of government. And for people like us on the other side, to start raising issues, we say we are playing politics with it. I don't think so. I think that we are defending the people's monies. It is money that belongs to everybody that has gone waste. And I have no doubt in my mind that those involved ought to be brought to book.
Right. Let me get you to, those of you who have the benefit of the television, to see the evidence of the afforestation project. And once again, cautiously, you know, Kukubako is pointing out to us that by the report that was submitted by the UDS, we should know that, of course, Joy was not able to visit literally all the plantation sites. But like somebody is saying on Facebook, Kuku may be holding Pasco. So this is the present thing and we ought to deal with this one. Let's watch this.
This is the Sada afforestation site near Pandai Senior High School in the northern region. Workers who took part in the tree planting project here are disappointed at the outcome. They've not been paid for 7 out of the 16 months they worked. But that's not all. The trees they planted are dying before their eyes. The story of Sada's afforestation project is worse in other locations. At the site near Bar Barracks in Tamale, about 70% of the trees had died at the time Joy News visited the site. At the Kamina Barracks afforestation site also in Tamale, not even a single tree planted survived. The situation in the Upper East region is worse. This is the Sada afforestation site at Boku Tampielem in the Boku Central Municipality of the Upper East region. In most of the sites we visited, we realized that there was no source of water. But just behind me is a dam. But all the trees here are dead. At the site near Zebila, also in the Upper East region, we realized a lot of the trees had died. The Sada afforestation contract was awarded to a construction company, ACI Construction Limited. The Upper East Regional Coordinator of ACI, Raymond Agbanto, took the Joy News team round the Winkogo afforestation site near Bolgatanga in January this year. He said the trees were withering because all workers had been laid off.
This place we planted about 4,500 trees.
4,500. It doesn't look like it's a good story here. What was the problem?
Basically, you could see that it's recently that the animals came in, you know, on top of the ceilings. But we laid the workers off from 1st October.
Sada's afforestation contract with ACI Construction expired in June 2013. Documents secured by Joy News indicate that the company wrote requesting a renewal of the contract, but Sada declined. As a result, ACI Construction wrote to all personnel at the afforestation sites to vacate. This has since left the trees at the mercy of the weather and animals. Another reason given by the workers is the late planting of the trees. They said most of the trees were planted during the dry season. So, is the Sada afforestation project a success story?
You have been around, you see how hot the sun is. If the trees go 1 month, 2 months without water, it's a different story. And as you can see, the whole place is getting brown. When the animals see anything green, they're going to graze on it. So if there's no one to drive away the animals, there's no one to protect fire from getting onto the plantation, there's no one to water, it can be a success story.
But the immediate past CEO of Sada, Gilbert Sedu Idi, does not think so. For him, whether the tree survived or not is not the most important issue here.
You see, the focus was plant trees, create employment. So number one is, has employment been created? Number two, have the trees been planted? These are the two focal issues that we use to be able to determine the achievement or otherwise.
Joy News also discovered that the project has left the vegetation cover of the afforestation sites worse than their surroundings. The natural vegetation was destroyed before the trees were planted. The inability of the trees to survive has therefore left the sites worse than their surroundings. At Blema in the Sola Tuna Kalba district of the Upper West region, we discovered that trees in the forest were felled and some bent in order to make way for the afforestation project. The trees destroyed included economic trees such as Sienna trees, which are considered the cocoa of northern Ghana.
If they show us the sites before the clearing, we tell them not to clear. But in some places, before you even get to the land they have for you, they are cleared.
But workers at the project site say they were forced to cut down the trees against their will. They say the cost of clearing the land before the beginning of the program was borne by ACI Construction, so they could not have cleared the land before the company came in. A former Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University for Development Studies, Professor David Miller, was one of those who first drafted the sada policy. He condemns the method of destroying natural vegetation in order to plant trees.
I was the project director for Savannah Resource Management Project, a World Bank project. That was in Tamale there. We did everything about tree planting. We realized that there were more problems with tree planting than the natural vegetation. So we went into natural regeneration, where you try to manage the natural vegetation in terms of pruning and doing all the cultural practices. Within that, you can now integrate tree planting so that the entire tree population is part of the project.
We also discovered that some parts of the sada zone do not need a afforestation project because of their thick forest cover. These are the areas where forests had to be cleared before the planting of trees.
I can say I was given a job to execute, and the job was supposed to be from A to Z. I couldn't have left out some.
Oh yes, but you could have told them that you asked me to plant trees. There are already trees here. It doesn't make sense to clear trees and plant trees.
You know something.
That is how our interview ended. He would not speak further, but former sada CEO Gilbert Sedu Idi justifies the decision to plant trees in areas which do not need the afforestation project.
Sada covers 5 regions. Now, when you come out with an activity and some regions are completely left out, that in itself has got its own ramifications.
And let me give you a solution. For instance, you say, for let's say Techiman, you have a lot of trees. Bongo is a very a desert area. Desertification is just taking over that place. So we are taking tree planting to Bongo, but with this same amount of money, instead of undertaking the tree planting project in your area, let's give you something else because you don't need it. Would that not have solved the problem?
That would have complicated it.
Joy News has learned that sada has contracted UDS to count the trees and report on the survival rate. It is not clear what percentage they will put out, but what is clear is that the 32.4 million Ghana cedis has worsened the vegetation cover of most of the sada afforestation project locations. For Joy News, Manasseh Azore Awene reporting.
Right. Dr. Gote, I'm restraining myself from being emotional. This may be just a part of it, but it tells me these are the hard facts on the ground.
I still will go back. I heard Honorable Ayuko talking about management, or that management and lackadaisical attitude. And that is why I still think the cause is not the lackadaisical management, but fundamentally how the decision was made. Is it that we do not have qualified people who would have advised that at the time of planting, what measures? Now, this gentleman who planted the trees was talking about, well, it's all brown now. As soon as the greens come, animals will come and graze, and we cannot, there's no protection. There's fire, there could be fire and so on. Were these not factored? Right. Knowing the area, you know, and so on. So we can spend a lot of time looking at the minute details. But the fundamental problem is that the way the decisions are made have to be reviewed. Yes, and this happens. This is why we also have to seriously look at the point of how are the institutions working on this. You see, the state's resources are best guaranteed in execution if you have a situation where your administrative bureaucratic structures are strong. Because all they do is they're making sure that you're bringing technical knowledge, admin, and finance to bear on a situation to produce a result. Now, if the man, the former ED says, well, what were we to do? We were to create jobs, and we were to plant a number of trees. And that, for him, were the important measures of whether the project has taken off or not. But he should have asked himself, for what result? Would you want to create a job today and tomorrow the person is out? Or would you want to sustain it? And therefore, if you're going to look at sustainability, what measures would that guarantee? Should you plant on a very wide scale? Right. Just because, or would you do it incrementally, making sure that you're protecting, you're building on, you're seeing progress, expanding and so on?
So let's stop complaining. What should happen?
I think what should happen essentially is that some hard decisions have to be made. And I hear that, for instance, if you take JIDA, there were institutional, legal. So you have to go back. You have to go back and begin to see who should take care of this project. I think that if the investigation, they should review how this whole thing was done, because the solution lies in understanding why we got this result. If we don't do and we're simply looking at individuals who are in the chess game, we are not getting anywhere, because it may well be that there are very powerful interests behind it. And so you could see how the president says, I want this done, but something else is happening. I see. And I think we have to begin to close those loopholes. The only way you can do it is to review how we got here. And in that case, we should also aim towards strengthening the administrative institutions, those we call the bureaucracies, so that professionals, competent people get in. The political oversight can be somewhere, but I believe that there is some political involvement in all these decisions. So there is some confusion.
Okay. I'll come to you, Kuku, shortly. But Ms. Egan, tell me, for example, if what you're watching, if the president sees this, he's excited to know that a lot of money is being voted and these people in these poverty zones are going to be taken out of their poverty. If he sees this, how will he feel? And if you were in his shoes, what will you do? You're cutting down economic trees to plant yours, and yours have not survived.
It's not only about how the president will feel when he sees this, or how the president feels when he sees this. It's about how we all feel. Yeah, there are Ghanaians who see this and they cry. Somebody told me about it, that he literally wept when he followed it. From what I've seen here, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. And this kind of wasteful expenditure must stop. It is not going to help us, in the end. It's really sad. It's really sad. If you had the opportunity in a cabinet meeting, what would you tell the president? I am sure that steps are being taken already. But we should stop putting taxpayers' money into things that in the end will not be of benefit to anyone. We need to look at projects that will work. We need to think through them properly. If you don't plan, you plan to fail. If you don't plan properly too, you plan to fail. This idea, I can't see anyone who will tell me this is not a good idea. But then obviously, we've got it wrong. And it's not only about government. I mean, we must all take responsibility. If they put you in charge to be responsible for something, I do believe that you have some responsibility, as a citizen, to make sure that you do your bit. It is very easy always to say government. But clearly there are people here who have really failed us. Right. And like he says, they failed us. They will just be asked, step aside. You lose your job. And that's the end of the matter. So you can't really be bothered that you are not doing the right things, can you?
Listening to ED, I must say that it makes me feel very sad to say that the two main aims is create jobs, plant trees. Is that all there is to planting a tree? You
he may have said more than that, but that
and
obviously may have come out badly. But he may have said more than that.
You know, but it shows the attitude. You know, why I'm talking about bad management, like a desk approach. Oh, let's go and plant trees, and that we have created jobs, and that was all. I mean, if this is what we need, a complete overhaul.
Right.
We need to punish some people. We need to make some people, you know, responsible. The government, the president, the chief executive must be bold to say that, look, something ought to be done about this.
Right.
I mean, my friend is accepting the point that we cannot allow taxpayers' money to go waste.
Right.
You know, and he's a government official, and therefore the president, the chief executive, must take responsibility and just, you know, do what he ought to do.
He has to say what he said, more so because he's here this morning particularly to tell people why it is important for them to pay 17.5% VAT
for sada projects.
For banking services. Koko, I'll give you the last word on this.
Well, relative to Mr. Idi, for me, his responses are a reflection, and I don't mean any malice, of his level of professionalism and communication capacity. I think there's something very basically wrong with it. Especially even, of course, it appears we are not going to deal with the Guinea Fowl one, because I would have given you a classic example of what I just said, and it's not meant to be an insult. But when you watch the clip carefully, one of the coordinators made a point that we planted 4,000 trees. By October, we had laid off the workers. So there was no protection for the trees.
One of them said they planted, they did not survive, they planted again. He spoke good.
In the contract, if you planted and it didn't survive, you plant again at your own expense. It's in the contract that way. So some trees that got burnt or didn't survive, the contractor had to replant at his own cost. That's in the contract. But I'm making the point, that's the point I was illustrating earlier, that sustainability is the key thing. Post-planting, you've employed. What happens after that? Now, if the contract is not renewed at a certain point in time, it ought to have been the responsibility of SADA to seek alternative means of managing the trees that had been planted. So as you indicate, the guy indicated, they laid off the workers October 2013. What happened after that? Who was in charge of managing those trees that had been planted? To water them and to prevent animals from grazing them. That's sustainability. It goes beyond planting and mere employment. And that was the key point I was making.
But do you find clear cases of causing financial loss in this matter?
It could come in, but I'm not a lawyer, and sometimes people jump. But fortunately, we have a former Attorney General here. I don't want to be speculative, but it could, and I use the word could. But the point I'm making is that, look, in terms of the policy decision, I'm not too sure, and it's been implied in what many people have, most of us have said, that there's nothing basically wrong with doing afforestation in that particular, those 5 zones that were targeted. So policy decision, I am not too sure. We can debate it. Somebody might say we could have invested it in this or that. That's debatable. We can do that argument. Now let's come then to the specific. How was the contract given? How did they select? There could also be problems there too, and we can interrogate that as well. But after giving the contract, did the contractor fulfill the terms of the contract, even if it was not procured through due process? Did it or did it not happen? Because you see, if a contractor did not fulfill the terms, the one giving the contract had every right to say, look, I asked you to plant this number of trees at this particular areas. If you hadn't, as earlier indicated, then you pay back or you go and do it at your expense.
Okay. You see, something, this is why we should review every. I understand there was a committee that investigated. We should look at the report. But it tells you, Kweku, you're making the assumption that whoever got the contract had the competence to do it.
No, but that's the point I made. I said that how did you select? I made all that point. It's implied. Yes, you have. It's implied.
Yes.
So can I proceed?
Okay.
It's implied. Okay. What you are making is implied in the point I was making.
Finish up in a minute.
The last one is now, if the contractor executed the business, the contract,
to the terms of the contract,
after you had failed to or declined to renew, whose business was it to carry on from there? It's SADA. And for that matter, to some extent, government. Yeah, these are the 2 lines of responsibility for what we are dealing with as at now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what you are saying is that if the contract...
The lack of transition.
Abrogated, but the trees have to grow, then SADA had a responsibility.
That's the point.
To ensure getting other people to go and
That's exactly the point I'm making.
Program.
Right. And like Kuku mentioned earlier, well, we can't spend the whole of the time on these issues, but you certainly also know about the Guinea Fowl project and what's become of it. We're told of a joint venture that was supposed to be done, or that was actually done, between SADA and the ACI company. Each party was supposed to pay some amount of money into the joint venture to set it up. SADA paid its portion of the amount, that is 15 million Ghana cedis. Unfortunately, the records, they are not aware if SADA, ACI paid its portion of that amount of money.
It's almost criminal for a former SADA chief executive not to know. I'm sorry that I said almost criminal.
When the board of directors for the joint venture company
has
the one
representation. He resigned. No, he resigned from that board, that joint venture company, April 12, 2013. He resigned. But he remained, I believe, SADA boss. But SADA's authority is not the person, ought to have records.
But where he also signs the check for the money that's supposed to go to the joint venture, and he signs that money payable to the company that is coming to do the joint venture.
This thing, of course, eventually I believe that the Auditor General and Parliament may help us resolve some of these matters. For me, bottom line. But you see, for instance, this is a board minutes.
I'm taking you just 2 minutes on that,
no, it's
and
very
then we'll
important.
move on.
It's just
2 minutes on that, because we are not discussing it.
Oh,
just 2 minutes on that, because you are giving an important information. That's why.
This is the second board meeting of the company, the joint venture company. And if you read, it says that this the minutes of meeting of the board of directors of SADA so May 7th, 2013. All those in attendance. Compliance of company law issues. The company secretary reported that SADA had fully paid up for its 12 million shares at 1 Ghana cedi in cash per share, and its share certificate handed over to it.
Right. 3 million had been paid earlier.
Yeah, that was for social
mobilization.
The company secretary reported that Asongtaba Cottage and Exchange Program had fully paid up for its 15 million shares at 1 Ghana cedi per share, and its share certificate handed over to it. Members requested a presentation to the board on the details of call of shares of Asongtaba Cottage Industries and Exchange Program. This went on to, and there's a list of the thing, report on call on shares on Asongtaba Cottage Industries and Exchange Program. They give the kind of things they brought on board. Cash, 12,145,000 Ghana cedis was paid in cash. The balance was brought in terms of 1 module farm in Upper East, 10 project pickup cars. They are all listed with their car registration numbers.
All right.
What I'm saying is this: if you don't know something, and you give a journalist an opportunity to interview you, you call for the records.
Right.
And provide the answers that are on records. You don't say you don't know. You make the situation even murkier. But all this, as I'm saying, is subject to final auditing process by the Auditor General and perhaps eventually by Parliament.
Right. Thank you very mumuch, Abdul Malik Kwekubaku Jr. And I just want us to now briefly, if I can take just about 3 minutes each from all of you, and I'm going to hold you strictly to it, to speak to the matter of the new JIDA advert that is soliciting proposals or whatever for the ICT module, which the government has now come in and stopped it, asked for it to be withdrawn. Now, this is a module that was originally already advertised and contract giving, monies paid for it, as far as the AGAMS group is concerned, and some training was supposed to be done. less than a third or 1/3 of that training was provided, even though they had been paid in full in advance of the contract sum. And we have the minister, no, the new acting coordinator of JIDA, who government makes us understand that his mandate was to ensure and I'm going to read government's letter that was brought in. This one was signed by Mahama Ayarga, who is MP and the media and information minister, media relations and information minister. Now, he signed that press statement and said, among other things, that the Kobie Champong, who was the acting executive director of JIDA, was being ordered to immediately cancel the agency's invitation for proposals from the public towards implementation of an ICT model. The adverts had been in the state-owned Daily Graphic and had been running for those proposals to be brought in. Mahama Ayarga said that the Office of the President reiterates that all directives on JIDA remain in force. And what are these directives? The directives to the effect that he is supposed to concern himself primarily with expediting action on the reforms contained in the initial presidential directives on JIDA to pave the way for implementation of models that will create job opportunities for the youth. Now, the question is that there are many people who don't seem to buy this explanation that the acting executive director of JIDA could have gone ahead, advertised for this module without the minister, first of all, sanctioning it, or the president being aware. So what is going on? It is as if, but for the media being alert and showing to the world that this is a program that has already been paid for and, you know, which in the process was also stopped, it would have gone. I'll start with you, Mr. Minister.
Yeah. Well, we all know what the Honorable Information Minister, said.
Right.
And that was the sector minister was not aware. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people have good intentions to do things, and maybe sometimes people get excited in wanting to get things done. But we must also understand that there are processes that you need to, follow. And clearly, if the sector minister is, wasn't aware, then the clearances that needed for this to come out were clearly not followed.
Some are saying that is just not possible. That the sector minister would not have been aware, because he is the one who would eventually sign the contract.
Well, as I said, you have the information minister,
right,
who has come out to say that the president called the sector minister, and the sector minister said he was not aware. And it is for that reason that, things were reversed. I wouldn't, I don't think we should go against that. It is possible, as I was saying, that sometimes, just out of excitement, people want to get things done. I mean, someone has been given a job, and he was probably running ahead of himself. I mean, clearly, maybe, some omission happened. And it is for that reason that we are where we are. So I wouldn't want to say that the sector minister was aware or is not true. The sector minister clearly, by Ayarga's statement, that he wasn't aware. And these things can happen.
Right. Mr. Aikoto, do you think people are justified in their suspicion and unbelief that this is not the case really?
I think so. Well, you see, we've all been there before. There are times that you have agencies, doing things in the name of the Honorable Minister when he has no idea about it. But talking about JIDA and the fact that we had a lot of problems for which the government had to, come in, set up, committees of inquiries to inquire into the problems. And again saying that, look, we're going to do a complete overhaul. We're going to have reforms. And then you put somebody there and give that person a remit. If the person has a remit to go and do reforms, how come that he moves on and then goes rather awarding contracts to people, you know, again, another likely wasteful venture, which according to Ayariga is not part of his remit. It calls for some sanctions. I mean, people are not too comfortable. Is it a way of trying to make money once again? That is the question.
And people feel that by the nature of that contract, the same provider, service provider, who got it did not deliver, even though he got all the money in advance, was most likely to win that same contract.
We sat in
I think you are speculating.
Well, we sat in this
I mean, people have liberty to speculate.
I don't think we can go that far.
No, people have liberty to speculate.
I think that it's not far-fetched. We spoke about this. I remember my friend Kweku Bako was not in favor of that. We felt that there were things happening which were not, you know, what we would have expected, you know. And then to go back to the same individual, to ask him to come and provide a service where he has been tested before, he's failed to provide that service, and people were calling for his head. At the end of the day, we were told that, oh, they've gone to meet the Attorney General, and they've, you know, come to terms as to how some monies ought to be paid, and that should end the matter. So nobody was being punished for it. You are going back to the same person, and you are saying people should not ask questions. I mean,
in respect of the refunds, I'm informed from the Attorney General's Department that so far 13 million Ghana cedis has been repaid under the repayment agreements that they reach with those entities, agencies, and JIDA. And these are in respect of RLG, Asontaba, and Craft Pro. So 13 million has so far been paid, and still many more are expected to ensure that they also make good their promise to pay up as quick as possible. Dr. Kwete, those who say that this should not end there, if this acting executive director was giving clear directives to follow, reorganization and implementation of the advice that has come, the recommendations that have come, that because of the loopholes, because of the non-existence of a legislative instrument and all other things, we have seen that a lot of money has gone down the drain. Let's make sure that we cut out that first. Should the president just be saying, okay, withdraw the adverts, end of matter, or he should go a step further?
Well, I'm not sure he should go a step further only with the acting ED. The minister has a lot to answer. You see, I'm worried that, and the question we should ask ourselves is, if the president hadn't intervened, what happens? Should we get the president involved in everything? The president, as the president of the country, ought to be supported by institutions and people put in charge. And I think where there's a clear indication of failure, especially in a matter that threatens to really raise a whole lot of questions about, and it's going to affect the ruling party, the government, and so it's a very serious matter. And if it needs to be cleaned up, those put in charge should be held accountable. I wondered when I heard the president had issued the directive, and then I said, but should the president bypass the minister and deal with, And this a minister whose appointment was clear that he was to report directly to the president. Yes, so he is not doing that then, obviously, for the president to act. And so why is the minister there then? How is he accounting for his either inaction or negligence or something? In any case, the advert went on for about a month, I'm told. And nobody spotted that out. What were the monitoring mechanisms, especially for a case that has attracted national interest and attention? So there again, I think for me, it takes me back. Who calls the shots on sada, JIDA? Should the president get in, and that is only when things stop? And if the president took his eye off, what happens? Because he has a whole lot of major things on his table. So the system, there's a system failure somewhere, which could either be reduced to the people entrusted with the responsibility are not discharging it, in which case they ought to be held accountable. And two, in trying to fix SADA, is there a clear plan? If you take maybe the government action paper and what needs to be done has been clearly defined, who supervises and how did the acting ED miss it? And who calls him to order? So accountabilities are needed, and maybe a little bit of intolerance may also help to show the seriousness with which
this is where we bring you in on the IDEC, multi-party governance project.
You mean linking it to?
No. But obviously, I mean, this is governance. This is governance. Yeah, we'll take a break quickly. Okay. But I come to you, Abdul Malik. Abdul Malik. Look. This is the president who, at the 7th UN Habitat, conference, was very clear in advocating the need to ensure that the youth, the rural poor, are lifted out of their poverty. And he said, and I just want to quote him briefly, he said that there's a need for interventions that must create equal opportunity for all our people to take advantage of the African dream. And he then paid attention to the Arab Spring. And he said that, what did he say there? He says that the Arab Spring had taught Africa that it was no longer acceptable to be ambivalent about the needs of the poor and marginalized in society. People are saying that if this is what he is championing, he should be seen to crack the whip so that this individual you appointed to reports to you directly, who goes ahead to advertise for something that was already going on that was stopped because of all of the issues, you should tell him to get out of the place.
Yeah, this faux pas, very inexcusable. So clearly, it's within the remit of the president to sanction. I cannot advise him on that, but ideally, in terms of the trust, you would expect some sanction. But you see, it also shows a certain weakness in government's own monitoring of the media. Because as far back as April 7th was when the Informer and my own paper, the New Crusading Guide, reported this incident. We picked it from the Daily Graphic. We looked at the advert, and both, incidentally, having two papers with very divergent, attitudes towards issues, did almost the same story the same day. Nobody appears to have bothered. Then Joy News comes in, reinforces it. Then a civil society group, the Mass Action Committee, comes in to also...
And the Obuasi MP to Kukukwati.
That's right. Before a certain credential, the credential wave is created, and then government acts. I would advise that they should strengthen their monitoring. The media plays a very important role. Civil society groups play very important roles. So sometimes you can take the sound bites from there, and it can help you to be alert. So that's one area. But clearly, look, the memo, this I just was able to intercept a copy of the draft memo and the draft
you mean as you were sitting here, you
yes.
It looks fresh though. It looks fresh.
It's fresh. Which is before cabinet, I'm told. It's not yet before parliament. So why is anybody in a hurry?
This is a draft memo for making sure that the JIDA is properly, is put in
which was one of the things stated in the action plan.
That's correct.
In fact, that for me, it was the most critical. Maybe first, but the second one was the prosecutions of wrongdoing. So you wonder why. But I thought initially the acting executive director was asked to work to the chief of staff. I don't know if that was reviewed. Okay.
As far as I remember, he was supposed to report directly to the president.
Yes, the ministry has a ministerial responsibility of a sort. But in this case, when the announcement came out of his appointment, if I recall correctly, we were told that he was to work to the chief of staff, who is in the office of the president.
But Kweku, you see, this is where the problem is. This matters ought to be handled professionally by competent people who are trained, for instance, industries in distress. You have a whole lot of people who go in because they know what they should do and what the priorities should be. But here again, you find out that all these institutions of problems are